Right. Okay. So, what we're going to do today is we're going to carry on what we spoke about last week. And last week we spoke about the centrality of Eretz Yisrael and how we have this ripple effect of Kedusha which develops. The rippling effect. Now, where does this come from? What's the big nafkamina that there's a ripple effect of Kedusha which stems out from Yerushalayim going out to the borders of Eretz Yisrael? And here we have something quite fascinating halachically. And that's what I wanted to show you before we get into the more machshava side of it, the ideology. So the Rambam says the following. Lefichach, since there is Kedusha in Eretz, in Yerushalayim, makrivim korbanot kulan, aval pi she'ein sham bayit banui. If you've got a mizbeach in Yerushalayim on Har HaBayis, and I'm not telling anybody to go and do it now, okay? Although there will be some lunatics who will do it. But I'm saying, you got a mizbeach on Har HaBayis, you don't need anything else. V'ochlim kodshei HaKodoshim b'chol ha'azara. And you can eat kodshim in any place in the Azara. Af al pi she'i chareva, even though there's no Beis HaMikdosh. Ve'eino mukefet b'mchitza, there's no barrier. That means you go on Har HaBayis, and the Mizbeach, you know exactly where it is, you can offer up korbanot. V'ochlim kodshim kan yomaisa sheni b'chol Yerushalayim. Af al pi she'ein sham chomot, even though there are no walls around Yerushalayim. Why? Sha'kedusha rishona kidsha l'sha'ata, v'kidsha le'atid lavo. Because the Kedusha, which Shlomo HaMelech did in Yerushalayim, is everlasting. It's never left. It's always there. Now, the Rambam now says, V'lama ani omer, why do I say such a thing? Now, this is one of the few times the Rambam, what?
I've never heard that phrase before.
Tries to justify himself. Now, whenever the Rambam uses terminology, yireli, lama ani omer, etc., etc., because you won't find a source of this in Chazal. Every word of the Rambam has got a source in Chazal. Bavli, Yerushalmi, Mechilta, you will always find a source of it. Except in situations where the Rambam will say, Yireli, it appears to me, or Lama ani omer. So here you can argue with the Rambam. Why? Because it's his own chidush. It's his own conceptual idea. In actual fact, the Raivad, the person who argued with him, did argue with him on this point also. But let's learn the Rambam. Velama ani omer, why do I say, B'mikdash v'Yerushalayim, Kedusha rishona kidsha le'atid lavo. Why do I hold that the Kedusha of Yerushalayim is everlasting, and the Kedusha of Shar Yisrael, Linyan Shvit Umasrot, V'kayotze be'em lo kidsha le'atid lavo. Which means to say, nowadays, according to the Rambam, Shumas and Maasros, Shvis, is just from the rabbis. It's just midrabanon. But the Kedusha of Yerushalayim is min Torah. Why do I say such a thing? Why do I differentiate between Yerushalayim and the rest of Eretz Yisrael? Says the Rambam, line number 11. Lefi, shekedushat hamikdash v'Yerushalayim mipnei hashchina. The reason is because on the place of Yerushalayim, the place of Beis HaMikdash, that's where HaKadosh Baruch Hu is. That is Shechina. That is the central point. That is the meeting point. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so to speak, is throwing, in inverted commas, arrows to this point in Yerushalayim. And that, Ushchina eina b'teila. V'harei hu omer, v'ashimoti et mikdeshechem. I will destroy your mikdash. V'amru chachamim, Af al pi sheshomemim, even though they are desolate, bikdushatam הם עומדים. There is still kedusha. Aval chiyuv haaretz b'shviut u'masrot, and the reason of shvius and masrot is because of kibush rabim, because we conquered it. V'kivan shenilkach haaretz mideihem, the minute the land is taken from it, batel kibush, the kibush, the place which is conquered, gets pushed aside. V'niftara min haTorah mimasrot u'mishvit, asher eino min Eretz Yisrael. We don't own it anymore. V'kivan shala Ezra, and since Ezra came, v'kidsha, and sanctified it, which is our kedusha now. Lo kidsha b'kibush, he didn't sanctify it through conquering, like Yeshua did. Ela b'chazaka, he took the proper possession over the land. Sheikh Zikuba, etc., etc., etc. So the Rambam says, Yerushalayim and the Beis HaMikdash is what? Is Shechina. That is the conceptual idea. The ripple effect of Yerushalayim, in actual fact, stops to a certain degree. Now, one of the things which you do have to understand is there are two concepts in the Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael. Even though the Kedusha of Trumas and Maasros is based on Kedusha of Ezra, but there's still Kedusha, this ripple effect, as far as many other things are concerned. For instance, the mitzvah, in inverted commas, of being buried in Eretz Yisrael doesn't make any difference where you're buried, because Eretz Yisrael is always there. That means there are two concepts: the land, the Kedusha Zakarka, the Kedusha of the land, and the Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael as Eretz Yisrael. So the ripple effect still exists in many, many ways. And now we're going to understand this in a very, very conceptualized way. Yes.
His last line, though, when he's talking about Shvit and Maasros,
it's only midrabanon. Outside,
that's still only Rabbanon.
Yes, it's only the Rabbanon.
That he
Yes.
He claims that Ezra
was
Makadesh.
But there's a problem there's not Rov Yoshvei Aleh, etc., etc. We're not going into all these things. I'm not.
I'm just saying, what does he hold? He still holds it's Rabbanon.
Yes, he's a soul still Rabbanon. Yeah. Now, says the Rambam, says Rav Soloveitchik on this subject. Lefi Rambam, Yesod Kedushat Makom, the foundations of the sanctifying of this place, Shechala b'mikdash Lo'olam va'edhu, is everlasting. B'asharat Shechina is because of Shechina, Kodesh Baruch Hu. V'nireh sheyesh hashrat Shechina b'Har HaBayis u'beBeis HaMikdash mishum. Why is that? Sh'Kodesh Baruch Hu b'char b'oto makom. Remember what we spoke about last week. B'chira. HaKodesh Baruch Hu chose Eretz Yisrael, and He chose Am Yisrael. Two b'chiras. Ki b'char Hashem b'Tzion, Iva leMoshav lo, Ki b'char Hashem b'Yaakov, etc., etc. Two b'chiras. Two concepts of choice. Now there's another one. What is that? Mishum שהקדוש ברוך הוא בחר באותו מקום להיות לו לבייס הבחירו, והוא המקום הנבחר הכתוב בפרשת ראה, כי אל המקום אשר יבחר השם אלוקיכם מכל שבטיכם לשום את שמו שם. Line number 25. אל המקום אשר יבחר השם. הקדוש ברוך הוא chose it. Therefore, what did he choose? He chose Yerushalayim, and he chose Eretz Yisrael. He targeted it. That was it. V'chalot b'chira, this concept of choice, kovat, fixes for us. Sheyesh hashrat hashchina b'mkom beis hamikdosh she'ina b'teila le'olam. And this b'chira, this concept of choice, says Rav Soloveitchik, v'nireh ki eser kedushot ha'elu mishtaychot likdushat beis hamikdosh kimkom hanivchar. Ripple effect. The center is Yerushalayim, and it goes out and out and out. Eser kedushot. 10 kedushas in Eretz Yisrael. Yes. 1 minute. You wanted to ask something?
Yeah. Don't we also believe that the Shekhinah was not the second Beit HaMikdash?
Pardon? Let me explain what we mean by that. I'll explain exactly what we mean. Okay? There are two concepts in the Beis HaMikdash. There's the actual building, which contains the Aron, the Mizbeach, Torat, the Shulchan, the Mizbach HaNechoshet, and all that goes with it. There were 5 kelim, 5 vessels, which we did not have in the second Beis HaMikdash. That means, what did HaKadosh Baruch Hu do? HaKadosh Baruch Hu took away some of his divine providence, because we didn't have the Aron. They only had the Even HaShtiyah. But the choice of place, 2 things. It's, when you insure your house, you insure your flat 2 ways. What it contains and the land itself. The land itself is the place where HaKadosh Baruch Hu chose. How you build your house on that land, that is dependent on HaKadosh Baruch Hu's relationship with Am Yisrael. Let me repeat that sentence again. HaKadosh Baruch Hu chose Yerushalayim, and it has this ripple effect of 10 Kedushot. Then you have the building in this place. Now, what you want to do, what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to do with that specific building, is in actual fact a relationship between him and Am Yisrael. In the period of Shlomo HaMelech, it was amazing. He let him do every single thing. Churban Bayis, the Beis HaMikdash gets destroyed. The place itself remains holy. The land. Okay? The land on which the Beis HaMikdash was built remains holy. What disappears? The building. Ezra Sofer, Zerubbabel comes back, builds a new Beis HaMikdash. Okay? What happens? It's not the same. There's no Aron. There's no Urim V'Tumim. Things have changed. HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't have the same relationship with us anymore. Then that lasts for 400 years. What does HaKadosh Baruch Hu do after 400 years? Lets the Romans destroy it. Okay? 2,000 years later, we come back. HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given us Eretz Yisrael. He's given us the Kotel in 1968, but he didn't give us Rabbi. Yet. Okay? So therefore, the building itself is a relationship between us and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But the place, the choice, just like we are chosen, so also the place is chosen. And that never ever goes. Okay? So therefore there are 2 functions. There's the building and the place. Questions? Yeah.
Hashem doesn't actually say Yerushalayim, does he? He says the place which I will choose.
Which I will choose. Who was it
that decided it was there?
Pardon?
It was before Shlomo, right? Before David.
Shmuel.
Yeah.
Shmuel HaNovi tells him, gives him the plans of the Beis HaMikdash, which is handed over from Moshe to Yoshua to etc. etc. Gemara in Zvochim Daf Nun Vav Amud Beis.
The place itself?
The place itself they knew about, and David HaMelech again had to buy it from Arnon HaYevusi. Again, it's a connection. Okay, the place is known, but how do we connect up with it?
So how do we know that was the place?
Pardon?
How do we know that?
The Rambam, we read it last week in the Rambam. Right. What did the Rambam say? Hamakom hazeh is the place of the Akedah, etc., etc. Mesorah, that's what the Rambam says. You remember that phrase? I haven't got it in front of me. Where's the Rambam? No, don't believe rabbis.
Remember.
Don't demand memories. Don't rely on memory. Let's read it out. Okay? The Rambam says the following: המזבח מקומו מכוון ביותר, ואין משנים אותו ממקום לעולם שנאמר, וזה מזבח לעולה לישראל. ובמקדש נעקד יצחק אבינו שנאמר בלך לך, ונאמר בדברי היומים. ויחל שלמה לבנות בית השם בירושלים בהר המוריה. Right? לך לך אל ארץ המוריה, and and Divrei Yomim, Shlomo builds the Beis HaMikdash, which appeared to David HaMelech, Nireh LeDavid Avihu, Asher Echin Makom, U'Mesoret Biyad Hakol. It was a tradition. Okay? You don't want to believe it? Don't believe it. I'm not going to force you to believe it.
It's reality.
Pardon?
How far does the tradition go back? To Moshe?
To Moshe Rabbeinu, obviously. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to him, the place which I have chosen. So what did Moshe Rabbeinu actually say? Moshe Rabbeinu came along and told Yoshua, there will be places which will be chosen. There will be a period of Mishkan Shiloh. Okay? Mishkan Shiloh was also chosen before the Beis HaMikdash. Okay? And that's what it's written. El HaMenucha ve'el HaNachala.
What was the reason Hashem didn't want to write specifically the place?
Pardon?
What was the reason Hashem didn't specifically want to write the place in the Torah?
First of all, you've got to ask the why questions to HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself. Okay? The why question, okay, now I'll give you our perspective. Okay? Because if it would have been written a direct place, the first thing they would have to do was to conquer Yerushalayim. Okay? Am Yisrael weren't ready for conquering Yerushalayim. They had to go through a process. What is the process? They have to appoint themselves a king. They have to have Mechias Amalek. Then they can get on with it. That means everything is a process. Okay? The worst thing is for a person, okay? The worst thing in life is to jump to the top of the ladder straight away. So what happens if you jump to the ladder straight away, on top of the ladder? You'll fall. And that's exactly what HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells the people. Are they ready at stage number 1 when you go in to Eretz Yisrael to jump to Yerushalayim and build a Beis HaMikdash? No, guys. I gave you that chance. I gave you that chance. And what did you do with it? You bungled it. I gave you a Mishkan. You had it. And what did you do? You bungled. Where did you bungle? Chet HaMeraglim. Misoinanim. You bungled it. And so therefore, what have you got to do? You've got to be trained. You've got to go and build yourselves up. And therefore, how do you do that? You do that once the Jewish people begin to realize we're one nation and not a group of different tribes. Okay? Which takes place in the whole book of Shoftim. Ein Melech b'Yisrael. What happens if Ein Melech b'Yisrael? Every tribe lives on his own. And therefore we go through a cycle of trying to recreate. The first one who tries to build up the nation as a whole is Shmuel HaNovi. Shmuel HaNovi sees that's his purpose. And he goes from place to place, building up this, uniting all the tribes together. And then HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to him, the time has come for a king. The people realize that. One central leader. Because remember, the Beis HaMikdash takes away that. Okay, the centrality. So therefore, there has to be what? A system of combining the people and the place together. Okay, right, let's carry on. That is the essence of Judaism. You don't jump to the top right at the end. You build yourself up. Says Rav Soloveitchik. He says, ונראה כי 10 קדושות האלו משתייכות לקדושת בית המקדש כמקום הנבחר, שקדושת בית המקדש שורה בכל מקום שבארץ ישראל. Every part of Eretz Yisrael has a little bit of kedusha until you come in to the central point of kedusha, which is Yerushalayim. So you have this ripple effect, and the surrounding areas receive a bit of kedusha from every place. For instance, let's give ourselves an example. The Mishnah comes and tells us in Masechet Kelim, the Omer could be brought from Eva Yarden, from the other side of the Jordan. That means even though they are on the other side of the Jordan, there is still the ripple effect of Kedusha that these people who live in Eva Yarden could bring the Korban Omer. If that was the first place where they found the barley. Bikurim can only be brought from Eretz Israel itself, not from Eva Yarden, etc., etc. Bikurim is brought to the Beis HaMikdash. The Korban Omer is brought to the Beis HaMikdash. But each one is different. And you have this ripple effect from the center to the outwards, but the outwards still receive their Hashra'ah from the Beis HaMikdash. Yes, Phil.
I think you might use another term. It would be radiation.
Great. Okay, great. Radiation, correct.
And it goes intensity and not.
Exactly,
I
radiation.
think
That's more than better than ripple effect. Correct. Radiation. It radiates, the Kedusha radiates outside, and it goes.
the center of power.
Correct. Right. That, guys, is the essence of what we spoke about last week. Now, once we've understood this concept that the center point is Yerushalayim, and as Phil says quite correctly, it radiates out. Now we have two Bechiros. The Bechira of Eretz Israel and the Bechira of Yerushalayim. Radiating out. Now comes along, and we're going to jump over Rav Soloveitchik because we haven't got enough time. And I want to start off with what we spoke about a minute ago. A Chidush of Rav Soloveitchik, of Rav Kook, in one of his Tshuvos. He says the following, and that will answer your question. What's your name? Steve. It says the following, line number 45. Line number 45, Rav Kook writes in one of his Shuvot, his responses, answers. And he says the following, V'chein b'yesod hat'amato shel HaRambam sham. The foundation of the reason of the Rambam, shekdushat hamakom Yerushalayim, mipnei hashchina v'shchina betela, v'dai ein kavanato al hashrat shchina begalui. Doesn't mean to say there's revealed divine providence. Shezeh mitchalef lefi hazmanim. The amount of divine providence is a function of time. It changes. It's not fixed. It's what? It's based on us. Ubebait sheni, and this is what you quoted, Lo sharta shchina, ki da'ama b'yuma. That's what you quoted to me. Ela kavanato pshuta, mishum kvod hashchina, shekivan shepa'am achat chal kvod Hashem al makom hamikdash. The minute HaKadosh Baruch Hu put his divine providence, sheyiched oto, he unified it, he created it, he made it unique. Sheyesh shmo hagadol nikra al habayit hazeh le'olam, אי אפשר שיתבטל. It can never be nullified. ויצא שום פעם מקדושתו. כי כבוד זה לשם שמיים שנקרא על הבית הגדול והקדוש לעולמי עולמים, אי אפשר להיות בטל. This can never be changed. And that's what we say every single day. Every single Yom Tov. What do we say? We say, in davening, we say, we say Umnecha Tohenu, etc., etc., and we say V'lasot Chavoteinu Bebet Bechiratecha Babayit Hagadol VaHakadosh Shenikra Shimcha Alav. Why? Mipnei Hayad Shenishtalcha B'Mikdashecha. Because somebody's taking it away from us. That means the Bechira is still there. And what do we say? Shetrashuv v'srachem oleinu, etc., etc. So that means what goes on? What goes on is we create this closeness between us and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's always there. How much Kedusha radiates is dependent on us. That's what it is. Right.
Which means what, Tachlis?
Pardon?
What depends us to go forth more specifically what we need to do to be...
Everybody knows what we've got to do. Everybody knows. We all know what we've got to do. We all believe in mitzvahs.
The secular people know that.
I'm not speaking to secular people at the moment.
All right.
Okay? I'm not speaking to secular people. We're learning.
I got it.
Okay? Everybody knows what. And I'm not saying. And then there's what your father asked last week. Phil asked last week. The when question. It also depends on what HaKadosh Baruch Hu decides. Okay? You had periods in history where you had greater Rabbonim, far greater than we are, and still HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't bring them back to Eretz Yisrael. 2,000 years. Okay? The why, the when, we don't know. 1948, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us what we've got. Right. But now comes the other side. The flip side of it all is what we're going to learn in the Ramban now. And the Ramban has this most unbelievable thesis regarding the conceptual idea of Eretz Yisrael. He says the following. We have the story of Sodom. Okay? We have the story of the flood. We have the story of Tower of Bovel. And we have the story of Sodom. Now says the Ramban, what's so bad about Sodom? What goes on here? Says the Ramban, Veda, line number 55. Ki mishpat Sodom. Haya lemalat Eretz Yisrael. The reason why the people of Sodom were punished in such a way was also because of Eretz Yisrael. Ki hi michlal nachalat Hashem. That is the place of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ve'eina sovelet anshei to'avot. And Eretz Yisrael cannot bear bad people. V'kasher taki et hagoy kulo mipnei to'avatam hikdima v'ka'ata et ha'am hazeh. You get to a stage, says the Ramban, where these people sink so low in their abominations that Eretz Yisrael throws them out. In inverted commas. Right? Shayura imikulam. People of Sodom were terrible. La shamayim vela briot. Between their relationship between them and God and socially. V'shamamu alea shamayim va'aretz v'ushchata haaretz belo refu'ah le'olam. And this place, Sodom, remains what? Barren. The only thing you can get out of there are chemicals. Chemicals. Nothing grows. Everybody who's been there sees it. That's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu does. He created this thing whereby, and how does it begin? The story of Sodom begins as the most fertile place in Eretz Yisrael. Fertile. Everything was great. Okay? 60 kilometers above that, you've got Yericho. Okay? The best dates in the world. Best dates in the world. 60 kilometers. You go 30 kilometers eastwards, westwards, you get to the whole of the Azor of Yehuda and Shomron. Sodom, nothing grows. Nothing. Why is that? Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants this place to remain a barren place in Eretz Yisrael, says the Ramban. V'shamamu alea hashamayim v'haaretz v'ushchata haaretz belo refuah le'olam. Without any way of what? Changing the systems. Mipnei sheba'avur tova nitga'u v'ra HaKadosh Baruch Hu she'ot livnei Mary. And Sodom will remain a place of remembrance to all those people who try to think that what? That we can behave the way we want to in Eretz Yisrael. Livnei Yisrael, it's a message to us, the Jewish people. Ha'atidim liyorsha, who are going to go and inherit it. And Moshe Rabbeinu says it specifically before he dies. Gofrit v'melach, sulfur and salt, sarfa kol haaretz. This place was burnt out. K'ma peichat Sdom v'Amora adma utzvoyim asher hafach Hashem ba'apo uv'chamato. So Moshe Rabbeinu, what does he say? He says, guys, when you're going to Eretz Yisrael, there'll be one place you'll go into where what? Nothing will ever grow. You can grow the best small peppers in the middle of the Arava. You can grow grapes there. But there's one place which you'll never be able to grow anything. And that is where? Sodom. That is the place of memory. It's a memorial.
It's also a warning.
It's a memorial and obviously a warning. Correct.
The warning is
Right. Ki yesh ba'umot ra'im v'chata'im ma'od. Because says the Ramban, listen guys, if you look through history, don't come and think that Sodom were the most wicked people. There were plenty like that in the history of humanity. V'lo asa b'hem kacha. And he's never done that to anybody else. So why does he do it here? Because says the Ramban, Lema'alat ha'aretz hazot haya hakol. Because this is Eretz Yisrael. Kisham heichal Hashem. This is the palace of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It doesn't make any difference who you are, how you are. You do not misbehave in the palace of HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
What about the Gaza Strip?
Pardon?
What about Gaza Strip?
No. ועוד אני עתיד לבאר זה בסדר אחרי מות אם יחייני המימית והמחיה. My plan is to write about this in Parshas Acharei Mos if HaKadosh Baruch Hu keeps me alive. Right? Im yechayeni, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will give me life. Hamemit, HaKadosh Baruch Hu who brings a person's death and gives life. Pardon? The Ramban. This is what he says. Ki yesh ba'umot. Line number 63. Ki yesh ba'umot, says the Ramban. Ra'im v'chata'im ma'od. People who are very, very rotten. V'lo asa b'hem. And he's never done it before. There's no place in the world, okay, which has been through an event which has caused such destruction. There might be, I don't know.
well, there is.
Pardon? No, but that's what people did. This HaKadosh Baruch Hu does. Oh, this is what HaKadosh Baruch Hu does. He did it.
It's a symbol.
It's a symbol. Okay? Right. This is the foundation of the Ramban. Yes, now questions.
Do we have borders? The previous questions, and I have some question. Are there borders which is Israel for the purposes of these statements?
According to the Ramban, this is the whole of Eretz Yisrael on the west side of the Jordan, our side.
On the west side.
The west side, yeah.
But how big is the west side?
From- From the river to the sea.
I'm in favor. I just think it would discuss well.
No. You asked me what are the borders. I'm saying from the rivers to the sea.
Of course, yeah.
Pardon? Oh, very interesting question. Whether Eilat was included or not, that's a big question. Okay, when they first conquered Eilat in 1948, there was a big shiloh whether you keep 2 days Yom Tov there or not. Because that 100%, it goes down to about 30 kilometers south of Beersheba. That is the border, approximately Mitzveh Ramon, was the original border of the Jewish, right. But it goes a lot further north.
Because the radiation travels a certain.
Exactly. Yeah, but I don't know about spiritual radiation. Physical radiation might be correct.
Radiation also, because basically also Jews, Galut, have the same halachic benefits in the eyes of Hashem as the Jews in Israel?
No, but obviously we're talking about, that's keeping mitzvahs, Phil. We're talking about geography, where how much HaKadosh Baruch Hu, let's say a guy will do, people will behave like Sodom did in Turkey. It won't happen. Why? Because there's no Kedusha there. It's not considered Heichal Hashem.
You know what?
It's not considered Heichal Hashem.
Hashem.
Okay, but the moment he hasn't done it, Heichal Hashem. Right. Okay.
Move on.
Now, 1 minute. Let's go one stage further.
Move on.
Let's go one stage further, and we're going to learn the Ramban, and a very, very important Ramban in Parshat Acharimot. But before I want to start the Ramban, I want to do two other sources. Line number 115 and line number 125. First one is the Maharal. Line number 115. Says the Maharal in Gvurot Hashem. וכמו שהארץ הקדושה מצד קדושתה אינה סובלת החטא, cannot bear sins, כמו שנאמר ולא תקיע הארץ אתכם כשתטמאו חס וחלילה הארץ. כך ישראל מצד קדושתם אינם מסוגלים אל החטאים. The two things which are chosen, Eretz Yisrael and Am Yisrael, they cannot live in sin. Doesn't work. ולפיכך, הארץ מתייחס לישראל. The land relates to Eretz Yisrael, Jewish people, בעניין זה. כי הארץ קדושה במעלתה נבדלת מן הפליטות ומן הטירוף, because the land is, because of its spiritual standing, is completely separated from abominations, וכן ישראל. כי לפי העניין האדם יש לו מקום. Every person has his place. Galut, Geula. Maharal explains they are both made up of the same letters, two central letters. Galut, Gimel, Lamed, Hey, and Gimel, Aleph, Lamed. Galut and Geula. The revelation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu manifests itself in exile and redemption. Gilui, revelation. It's the same word as a wave, Gal. Gimel Lamed. Gimel Lamed are two letters which create a centrality of place and people. The revelation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is in Galut, when a nation gets exiled, and where they are redeemed. And it's this constant cycle of Galut and Geula. Why is that? Because everybody, guys, needs a place to stay. That is the essence of life. Ein lecha adam she'ein lo makom v'sha'ah. Time and place. Place, your house where you live, is part of your identity. That is who you are. And the identity of Am Yisrael is in Eretz Yisrael. And when they lose their identity, then what happens? They lose their place. Etc., etc., etc. And that is how HaKadosh Baruch Hu reveals himself. It's like a wave, a gal. Moving, moving, moving. The whole time, this movement. And the Gilui Shechina, 1 minute, and this revelation of a Shechina is in actual fact in a movement of Galut and Geula. And that's what the Maharal says. Line number 119. Ki lefi ha'inyan ha'adam yesh lo makom. Everybody has got a place in the world. לכן כשנתן הקדוש ברוך הוא הארץ הקדושה לישראל מפני שראויים לה. וכן לכל אומה ואומה, every nation נתן הארץ כפי מה שהם. It's not an accident, guys. We say that in Parshat Ha'azinu. What do we say there? Hazinu Hashamayim v'Yisma Eretz Mefi Arov Kamata Lichit Tizal Katay. Katay Imasi Kisei Anidesh Rimon Yosef Shem Rav Benanon Kishem Hashem Ekra V'Godel Elokeinu Atzut Amim Balog Yichot V'Chol Emes Yatsev Gvulot Amim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives Gvulot to people. History is the same word as Hester, hidden. Hester Ka, history. Hysteria. History is Yatsev Gvulot Amim Lemismar B'nei Yisrael. Geography and history are intertwined. And says the Maharal that everything goes together. Each country, each human being has his place, and each human being has a country, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that's what you call a very famous book which was written on the psychology of nations. Don't remember who wrote it at the moment, perhaps it will come to my mind in a minute. The psychology of nations. Each nation has its own psychology, and it fits into the place where they live.
You mean the Wealth of Nations? No.
Pardon?
The Wealth of Nations? No.
Sorry?
The Wealth of Nations by Smith, Adam Smith?
And perhaps I don't remember. Well,
Yeah.
it'll come to me in a minute. V'chol davar yesh lo makom. And every place has got a what? Everything in the world has got its place. Lefi tiv'o u'ma'alato. Every plant has a special place. You can't go and plant a palm tree in England. Why not? What will happen to it? What? It's not enough sun. Okay? And there's certain plants which can't grow which grow in England, and they can't grow here. Everything HaKadosh Baruch Hu fits. One minute. V'lachein lefi, in the same way as we understand in the world of nature, there are places for certain things, so human beings have set places. V'lachein lefi ma'alat Yisrael, because of the standard of Am Yisrael, sheyesh lehem ma'ala nivdelet, k'tusha, yesh lehem eretz k'tusha. And the two always go together. And that's why Galut and Geula are always together. Nations, place, time, everything fits in. And that's why the Ramban comes and tells us, even before Am Yisrael came into Eretz Yisrael, what did HaKadosh Baruch Hu do to them? He set up a memorial. He set up a place. Guys, I'm bringing you to Eretz Yisrael. Even in the time of Avraham. And Avraham doesn't have children yet. Yitzchak isn't born when the story of Sodom takes place. Because now Avraham Avinu has to imbue in Yitzchak and show him, guys, we live in Beersheba now. 30 kilometers from here is a place where HaKadosh Baruch Hu destroyed. I saw it. Lot sees it. His daughters see it. And from then onwards, this becomes this horrendous memorial of what happens to people in Eretz Yisrael when they don't live up to the requirements of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's the concept of the Ramban. And now we're just going to finish off, and then you can ask all the questions you want. Says the Ramban, in his famous drosha on Rosh Hashanah. The Ramban, at the end of his life, comes to Eretz Yisrael. He has to leave Spain after the famous debate which takes place. And he comes to live in Eretz Yisrael. And he arrives in Akko. And in Akko, he arrives there just before Rosh Hashanah. And he meets there some of the great pupils of the Balei HaTosfot. And they ask him to give a drosha on Rosh Hashanah. If you look in the first volume of the writings of the Ramban, there are 4 droshas of the Ramban, one on Kohelet, one on Rosh Hashanah, and another couple of droshas. And this he gives in Akko. And he speaks about how he was driven out of Spain. Okay? But where's he come to? He's come to Eretz Yisrael. Now he says, Nimtza. It is found. Line number 124. Guys, this is perhaps the most profound statement of the Ramban on this subject. Nimtza. Kiruvan shel Yisrael etzel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Because Am Yisrael is so close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hu hagorem lehem vichuk v'galut v'chol onesh. The closer you are, what happens? The further you get if you don't stand up to the expectations. Expectations create responsibility. You want me to be your friend. Some sort of relationship. And this relationship creates connection and disconnection. Nimtza kiruvan shel Yisrael etzel HaKadosh Baruch Hu hu hagorem lehem richuk. This causes the same thing. Causes what? The disconnection. V'chol sheken hazochim leishev lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Those who sit in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, ba'artzo, in his land, in his palace, sheheim kmo ro'eh pnei HaMelech. You see HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Guys, when we live in Eretz Yisrael, we see HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ve'im zehirim bichvodo, and if they're careful in his honor, tov lahem, it's good for them. V'ashreihem, and they should be happy. Ve'im mamrim bo, and if they rebel against him, ein lecha mered gadol mizeh. There's no greater rebellion. V'oy lahem yoter mikol adam, and they're worse than anybody else. She'em osim milchama im hamelech b'paltim shelo, because they are creating a war within his palace. Umachisim oto, and they're making him angry b'fanav. Uma oseh lahem, what does he do? Motziam min hapaltim, he throws them out of his palace. V'tordam min b'chol ha'olam, and travels them all over the world. Hu shene'emar behem ha'am ha'machnisim oti al panai tamid. Yirmiyahu says it. The people who make me angry. The whole story of Yirmiyahu is Yirmiyahu is trying to say, guys, the Churban is coming. You're still behaving the way you do? You're in the palace. Didn't help. And the Ramban says that itself is the tension which Am Yisrael have in Eretz Yisrael. That is the tension. The tension is, I've given you something, how do you deal with it? Kiruvan hi richukam. The closeness creates the richuk. The higher the expectancy, the more responsibility. Lack of responsibility lowers expectations. Oh, then HaKadosh Baruch Hu interferes. And that is the essence which the Ramban's coming to tell us. We're now living in Eretz Yisrael. What's going on here? In one of his letters to his son, he writes, the holier the place, there's more destruction. He comes to Yerushalayim. Guys, he builds the shul, Knesset HaRamban in the old city. The Ramban writes about it. And he sees the destruction of Yerushalayim. And then he goes to Hebron, which is a bit better. Why? Because he says, the closer you are, the more the place is destroyed. That is the tension which the Jewish people live in Eretz Yisrael. Okay? Now, in order to understand this concept in its macro and micro, we have to learn this long Ramban, which we should have learned last week, Parshas Acharei Mos. Okay, let's just start off the sentence in line number 65. We're going to learn this Ramban in depth. Vatitma haaretz. Line number 65, guys. Vatitma haaretz. It's talking about the parsha of arayot, immoral relationships. Vatitma haaretz. And the earth will become impure. Va'efkod avona aleha. And I will throw this iniquity on it. Vataki haaretz. And the land will spew you out. Says the Ramban, Hechmir hakatuv ba'arayot. The Torah was very stringent regarding the laws of immoral relationships. Ba'avur haaretz. Because of you living in Eretz Yisrael. Shetitameh bahen. You will become impure. Vatakia nefashot ha'osot. V'hinei. Says the Ramban, there's something very strange about this. Why? Because the laws of immoral relationships doesn't make any difference where you are. Whether you're in Chutz La'aretz, whether you're in Eretz Yisrael, what difference does it make? V'hinei ha'arayot chovat haguf. The laws of immoral relationships is something to do with me. What I do, it's got nothing to do with the land. Yet, ve'einam tluyim ba'aretz. And they're not dependent on the land. So why should HaKadosh Baruch Hu, why should the land get involved in something which has got nothing to do with you? It's you and another woman. So what is it, says the Ramban? Why are we getting so involved in this? And then the Ramban comes and tells us, V'hinei kidesh ha'am hayoshev ba'artzo. HaKadosh Baruch Hu sanctifies this nation. Ba'artzo bikdushat ha'arayot. With the laws, the holiness of sexual relationships. Now I'm going to tell you something which is quite amazing. When we go to a wedding and we hear the brochas of chuppah and kiddushin, what do we say? We say the following: Asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al ha'arayot. He commanded us on immoral relationships. V'asar lanu ta'asot v'hitiv lanu ta'asot dei chuppah v'kiddushin. Baruch atah Hashem ha'mekadesh amo Yisrael. It's the only brocha which what? Where HaKadosh Baruch Hu sanctifies the Jewish nation. No other brocha is mentioned. Mekadesh et amo Yisrael. Al yedei chuppah v'kiddushin. Pardon? That's mevorech. This is mekadesh. No, that's in order that they could mekadesh this money. But again, it's not written mekadesh amo. This is his nation. How does he mekadesh them? Through chuppah and kiddushin. Marriage. And we introduce it this way. So what is the greatest kedusha which exists within the Jewish people? Through marriage. And the Ramban comes along, and that's exactly what the Ramban says. V'hinei kidesh ha'am hayoshev ba'artzo b'kedushat ha'arayot. And rov hamitzvot liotam lishmo. So what is it? Arayot and mitzvahs. And then ulekach amar ushmartem et kol chukotai ve'et kol mishpatai v'asitem otam v'lo taki haaretz etchem. I'm going to finish off with a fascinating insight of Rabbi Shimshon Hirsch. Every Wednesday I give a shir on Zoom of Rabbi Shimshon Hirsch on the Parsha. It says, Kadoshim tiyu ki kadosh ani Hashem. What is the first mitzvah in Kadoshim tiyu? Ish, imo, va'aviv tira'u. How do you get to Kedusha? The first thing you do is you have to look at your parents. Parents are an essence in three worlds. Number one is how they eat, and what do they eat? And that's why preceded to this is machalot asurot, Parsha Shmini. The next one is Tuma and Tahara, Taharat HaMishpacha. And the third one is how they behave to one another. Parshat Harayot. Okay? I always say to a young couple, guys, when you get married, your bedroom is Kodesh Kodoshim. That's your Kodesh Kodoshim, your bedroom. Nobody else goes in there. Except whom? Children. The children have a right to go into their parents' bedroom. Parents of the couple, you've got to ask permission. Children, just walk in. Why? Because children, their job is, the parents have to be an example to the children. And that's why children go into the parents' bedroom. They have to be an example of how they behave. They go into the kitchen. Everybody else is a visitor in the house. Except whom? The children. They see how they eat. They see how they behave. How they speak to one another. And that is why, if you want to be Kedoshim Tiyu, who've got to be the first example? Parents. Chodesh Tov, good Shabbos, and happy birthday. Phil, happy birthday.
It's not the Arayos that the Torah talks about. It's nothing.
It is.
The Arayos in Nechemya is illicit relations.
And here also.
And the relationship between a single man and a single woman is not being. It's
No,
not
and
an
it's also who you can marry.
Who
You can marry. What?
Yosef.
Yosef. Who you can marry. Yeah, of course. That's what Yosef. Yosef, yeah. Yeah. Who you can marry.
How do you understand historically, and I'm assuming that the way I'm saying